All right. Hey, you are here with the Respecting Perspectives podcast. And thank you for joining us. I have Brian Potts here, who is the owner of HCD Studios. He is a musician, a photographer, a world traveler. Gosh, man, tell me a little bit about yourself. Give me a little bit about how you ended up in the seat here.
Oh, well, I guess it's been quite a journey. I'm a native Marylander. I grew up in between Catonsville and then mostly out in Howard County. And I've just been a passionate creative, my entire life. I've always been an artist in some form or another. I can remember being a little kid and learning how to draw and paint and always loved cameras. And but drums was always my main thing. Once, I had an experience when I was 4 years old, played drums at my aunt's wedding. So that was, I guess, my first gig, so to speak.
Right.
But yeah, just like getting up on stage, and I remember not being able to reach the kick drum pedal and just kind of like hitting everything with the sticks and just really feeling it. And then a couple other experiences, and then, when I was 10 years old, I started playing drums and just never looked back. So, we met through music, and a lot of things in my life have happened through music. So, I would say music is really why I'm here in this seat.
I love that, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So wait, the first time you've ever played the drums was when you were 4 years old, man. Tell me what that was like. What type of feelings did you get when you were in that seat?
Well, I can tell you, I have a picture of me on the drum set, and it's next to my bed. It's something I look at every day.
Nice. And
I just remember it being just this incredible feeling, that like an expression. I didn't understand it at the time. Obviously, I was 4 years old. I barely knew what I was doing, but I just remember it being like the coolest thing that, I would hit, this thing here and it sounded one way, and this other thing over here sounded, like crash, boom, and I just remember just feeling like this connection that I couldn't describe.
Yeah.
Years later, I heard somebody tell me a story, and a paraphrase, but there were two African drummers a couple miles apart, and one guy started playing a rhythm and the other guy heard him. And then when he stopped, the other guy started playing. And so they kind of like what we'd call trading fours almost, right?
Yeah,
like they were like playing back and forth. And so they decided that they would seek each other out. And the one guy said, he said, "What were you saying?" And he said, "I hear you, brother, but I can't understand what you're saying." And it's just like, I badly paraphrased that story, but it's just a story about like the language of music and how it connects people.
Man, I love that, dude. I feel like music is universal, and really, there's times where I don't understand the actual lyrics themselves, but there is a feeling of understanding behind it, and it really gives me a lot of appreciation for language itself, and being able to learn it. And music has really helped shape my life, and sounds like yours as well, and a lot of the people around us, to be able to help us communicate with each other. It's a beautiful thing. Tell me a little bit about your musical background, a little bit post the 4-year-old and 10-year-old stories there.
Well, an interesting story that I often tell younger drummers is so my mom was noticeably displeased when I came home and told her when I was in middle school that I joined the band. And she said, well, what instrument are you going to play? And I said, the drums. And I don't think my parents really knew what to expect at that point.
Right.
And I said, I'm going to play the drums, and I want you to buy me a drum set. And my parents, like, this is one thing I'm really grateful for, is that my parents never really gave me things. Like, of course they did, but like the things that they made me earn stuff is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
They made me work for things. So this story goes, little me, I want a drum set. My mom and dad are like,
how old were you?
10 years old.
Okay.
Right. My mom and dad are like, no, we're not buying you a drum set, but we'll make you a deal. If you keep playing all through middle school until you get to high school, then we'll buy you a drum set.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, okay. So that gave me like the determination, right? So my dad was a carpenter, he's retired now, but he still builds things all the time. I'm also a carpenter, is one of the things that I do and enjoy. And I have loved to build stuff ever since I was a little kid, mostly hammered my thumbs for a long time, but eventually I figured it out, lots of splinters and whatnot.
Right.
So undeterred, stubborn me goes to my dad's wood shop, and I built my own drum pad set.
What?
At 10 years old, and I glued pieces of rubber onto MDF, and I built stands out of 2x4s, and I put supports on the bottom, and I built a bass drum pedal with a little spring in it, so it would actually go up and down like a pedal. And I mean, this thing was serious. I wish I still had it, honestly.
Right.
And then I took old signs, my dad's old advertising signs that were pieces of sheet metal, and I cut circles out of them, and I drilled a hole in the middle, and I put pop rivets in them, and I made cymbals.
How did you know to build things in this way?
I don't think I really did know. I mean, I had the basic skills, but I was totally designing it as I went along.
Of course.
I'm very much
through error.
Yeah, I'm very much an autodidact.
Oh, what is that?
So an autodidact is someone who can teach themselves, or can easily learn things on their own.
Okay.
So I had plenty of experience of like using tools and things like that, not power tools at that point. At least not without my dad's help.
Of course.
But I was and always have been like a very hands-on creative kind of person. So I just thought, hey, look, I got to build something to hold it up, and I got to build something to hit on the top. And I knew that rubber cement would hold the rubber or the rubber to the wood. So I, and like, I don't even remember if I even got permission.
You probably did.
I just went, it was like a big, huge wood shop with all the tools and lots of material. And so I just grabbed some things and put it all together and put it in we had an upstairs family room in between my sister and I's room. And, the rest, as they say, is history.
Right. Oh man, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Were you able to, how long did you have that set, before what you were then able to get your own drum set? You were able to fulfill the mission there?
Yep. It was motivating enough for me to stick with it. I played in all the bands, like all the bands that they offered.
Okay. At school and whatnot?
Yeah, at school. And took a few private lessons. A lot of what I learned by listening and playing along with things, which later on led me to it contributed to my abilities as a session drummer, where I could listen to a piece of music maybe a couple times, 2 or 3 times, and then basically go in and play it off the top of my head.
Wow, that's impressive.
And yeah, I mean, it was something that took a long time to to develop, but it's something that I'm proud to be able to do.
Yeah, that's awesome,
sure.
man. I think that takes a special ability to be able to just hear something and turn it into something else. I guess that's what all music is, and that's where that kind of creativity aspect of an artist, comes into play. A little bit more though about the music. Where would you say you kind of went with that, kind of leading up to what you're doing now with that?
Well, I started playing in bands, like my own bands, pretty soon after I got a drum set. A few years later. I remember being in middle school and just like wanting to play like this one syncopated beat and just like working at it so hard
on a mission.
And now like for me now, like playing drums is like walking. Like I don't think about it. It just comes out, right? Like they say, 10,000 hours or whatever, I've probably spent a lot more than 10,000 hours for sure.
Right.
But, yeah, I just, like those experiences of playing in bands led to wanting to record our music. And back then we had, like everybody says, oh, back then we had 4-track tape machines and we recorded on cassettes, and it's like, and for real, I mean, that's what we did. And we didn't even have 4 microphones, and I think we might have had 1 mic stand and like 2 microphones were like just taped on to something to get them off the ground and hang them in the air somehow, It was like guerrilla recording for sure. But I mean, eventually that led to me, recording in like real studios with like real, legit stuff and a lot of analog recording to tape and ADATs and stuff like that. And then at a certain point, I had a partnership with 2 people that I played music with, and we all had a studio together so we could like pre-produce and record. And then I kind of went out on my own after a while of that, and started my own studio and started making different kinds of records for people and
Tell them about your
playing
studio
drums.
now. What's the name of it? And
it's still HCD Studios.
HCD.
I mean, I don't really right now. I don't really do the same kind of commercial work that I used to do. I do like live event production.
Okay.
But I still write music, and I have a killer recording studio, and like, not to brag, but like a really nice collection of actual real like vintage analog gear and all the fancy microphones and all those things. And I build electronics, so I've been able to build a lot of the things that you see in the major label studios. I'm able to build those same circuits now.
Yeah, and I think something that to touch on with that is, right, being able to kind of put all those things together, I think makes you a lot more appreciative of the systems that you have at your fingertips, right? What are the advantages of, being able to build something yourself rather than just like going to like Guitar Center or Sweetwater to buy it?
Well, it's led me, for one, to have a really cool job working at, a university and doing all the repairs for the entire university for that department. But I would say, I mean, like, there's no 2 ways about it. Having a recording studio is not easy, and it's not inexpensive. Right. And now if you want to get a 2-channel interface and plug it into your laptop, and you get a set of headphones and a couple microphones, then you could say, okay, it's not that expensive. But when you want to record a band, when you want to record live drums, live instruments, and you got to have enough microphones and enough preamps and enough compressors and some equalizers, because my recording philosophy is like, part of it was influenced by Dave Nachotsky, who's a very well-known local engineer.
Mm-hmm.
But I worked with him a lot. And so it's about really getting the sound that you want going in. It's about really getting the instrument the way, choosing the right instrument, like the right drums or the right guitar amp or the right bass guitar, whatever. Getting it to sound the way that you want, putting the microphones, choosing the right kinds of microphones, putting them in the right place. I mean, it's all of these little details that add up. And so anyway, it's very expensive to go out and buy that stuff from like a Guitar Center or a Sweetwater or whatever. And we're very fortunate nowadays, as anyone who's really involved in audio knows, to be able to buy kits and parts of these circuits, these famous circuits. I mean, I've built, Neve, API, SSL, Millennia, Neumann, AKG. I mean, other things like that. Like, if you know audio, you know what those names are. I just built my second Uri 1176 clone. I built an SSL G-Bus compressor, which is like one of the really famous compressors.
How much would things like that cost if you were to buy them?
I think an 1176 a Uri right now is probably, I don't know, $2,500 or something.
And how much would you be able to make it for?
I mean, the kit, like parts wise, would be like less than, a little under like $700.
Wow.
But then it's probably a 14-hour build, maybe plus calibration. So you got to have,
that's a good point.
You got to have a tone generator. You got to have a certain kind of multimeter. You got to have a really good soldering iron. You got to have a reasonable tool collection, not a lot of stuff, but you got to have a place you can work, with some ventilation, so you don't, drive yourself crazy inhaling solder fumes.
Right.
But so for me, the real benefit was being able to build things, also being able to fix things when they break, being able to make all my own cables, being able to wire all my own patch bays, being able to offer my services to other studio owners.
That's a good point.
I mean, this place that we're in right now, the Watermelon Room.
You know a little bit about the Watermelon.
I know a little bit about the Watermelon Room.
Why don't you give us a little history to?
Yeah, that was like, I want to say that, like, thank you for all the conversations leading up to this,
dude. Yeah,
and
I'm super appreciative.
And I don't want to. I'd be remiss if I don't thank Matt Gruby for being, along production wise with you.
Thank you,
for
Matt.
Everything he's doing. I've known him for years.
Fellow drummer.
Yeah, really. He's a really talented drummer. He's always been super nice to me and kind, and like we've always gotten along. And shout out to Garrett Long. I mean, Garrett's Garrett's the owner here of the Watermelon Room, and he was my longest serving and best assistant and first intern and then assistant engineer. We worked together on, I don't even know how many records.
How long ago was this?
Like, I don't know, 20 years or something. Like, I don't even know, man. Like, time, it's like I'd have to think about it.
Right.
Several of my studio iterations ago, and he's been with me through, all of those. And so, and he's a really talented guy, and he's done a great job here, and it makes me proud to see, to know that, like, I was able to have, to mentor him for a while and work with him, and we learned so much from each other,
That's awesome.
I think one of the best things that I learned from having interns and assistants is from the questions that they asked me that I didn't know.
Forced you to learn more for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you got to rise to the occasion, and it reminds me to remain humble. There's like, that's one thing I've always loved about drumming is, like, you're never going to learn it all.
Right.
you could study jazz your entire life. You could study progressive metal. You could drill down to like one particular style of
niche.
music and study that your entire life, and you're never
Right.
going to learn it all.
How cool is that?
It's amazing.
Isn't it?
I will never forget when I was living in India studying classical Indian music. I lived with my teacher and his family.
Oh, cool.
And I will never forget the first time that I sat down. It was a lesson, but it wasn't like any of our other lessons had been. And so we were sitting there and we were playing music together. And I mean, I've been playing drums for, let's see, it would have been 26 years, I guess, at that point.
Mm-hmm. Long time.
Yeah, a long time. And I felt like nothing in my entire musical career had prepared me for this moment.
Oh, and why do
Like,
you say that?
Because I felt like a complete beginner.
Oh, wow.
Like I made just mistake after mistake after mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not used to that. I mean, of course I make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
Yeah.
But it was just like, it was
Humbling.
like, wow, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more with your travels themselves. How music has maybe led you into that, or not even music itself, but I know with some of the conversations that we've had that you have been around the world. Tell me some and the listeners some places that you've been and some of the things that you've learned in those places.
Wow. It's really hard to put it into words. I mean, I've been very fortunate. I've been to 29 countries on
Who's counting?
five continents. Yeah. I mean, and I say that I say that with some humility. Like I realize how fortunate I am to have had these experiences,
Right.
and I've done my best to share those experiences with others. That's one thing that sort of like reignited my love of photography, was all like doing travel photography. I was like, let me share these experiences with people. And then I was beautiful. Like, if I'm going to share these experiences with people, I better like go back to my art fundamentals, my color theory, my framing and my composition techniques, you know, and the storytelling of how do you tell a story with a photo. But I mean, yeah, like so many experiences I've had traveling. I think it's one of the things that I recommend most, like when I teach young people and when I mentor young people at the university that I work at, it's something that I recommend to pretty much everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I recommend traveling alone.
Yeah, we just talked about that in the past episode with Grayson, and it really depends on who you're traveling with to be able to bring out that particular side of you. But why would you say traveling alone? What do you think the benefits of that are?
Well, so to be clear, I'm not recommending always traveling alone, right? I'm not recommending only traveling alone.
Gotcha.
But I'm recommending traveling alone with like intention.
Okay.
Right? So to me, there's like traveling that's like there's like tourism and traveling.
Okay.
Or like there's like going on vacation and then there's traveling.
Oh, I like that.
So, I mean, to me, a vacation is, we go to the beach, right? Mm-hmm. Or we go, we like to go to national parks. Mm-hmm. Steph and I like to go to national parks. And so that's a vacation for me. It's more relaxing. You're kind of just having fun and things like that. Whereas when I think of traveling, I think of immersing yourself in another culture. I think of learning a little bit of the language if you can. Mm-hmm. At least how do you count from 1 to 5? Ek do Ekto Teen Char Pach, right? I can count to 5 and I don't know how many languages, but
Nice.
quite a few. But just, I mean, those basic things, like how to say thank you, in Hindi, so you say dhanyabad, like saying, like you say dhanyabad to somebody and their face lights up,
right?
Because they're like, this person is trying, right?
Yeah.
But I think the reason that I recommend traveling by yourself is it's just you. It's you walk out the door, and one of my favorite things to do is just turn left or right.
Right.
Right? I don't have a plan. Maybe I have a plan. Okay, maybe I want to go see this thing today at whatever time. But just walk out the door and you turn left or right. And the adventure happens.
Right.
And you're not you're reliant on yourself. You're dependent on yourself.
Good point.
It builds confidence. It builds a sense of being able to handle sort of like whatever life is throwing at you. My university job, I do large scale events and like broadcast sports and things like that. So it can be very stressful. And it can go from like a walk in the park to like a total stress fest in a matter of like seconds sometimes, when we're broadcasting out, and things like that. So it's just being able to know that, as I like to say, like the universe makes space for us.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So
what does that mean? If dig into a little bit of that.
Well, let me come back to that, but let me just say a couple more things about traveling.
Of course.
It's there's a self-confidence that you gain. It's like people have problems with anxiety a lot of times, and your mind is sort of in the future when it should be more present. And I think a lot of times those thoughts can be like thoughts of like, I'm not going to be okay. Right. But when you're traveling and you're going through those things and you're in places that you've never been and you meet people and you deal with language barriers and strange foods and all of these experiences, like it just builds a level of self-confidence and like centeredness that I haven't found another thing that does that.
Man, that's crazy that you said that. I never really put that piece of the puzzle together, of the fact that as you're traveling, you're kind of coming across many different challenges that maybe you haven't been able to put yourself in, and those hurdles themselves can really build character. So yeah, I love the way that you put that, and I think it takes a special type of person to be able to kind of open the door. And when I was a kid, I was always, up until a certain age, obviously, I was always scared to like sleep over friends' houses or this or that, But then once I started to get to see some things around the world, it really did. I then it ignited some sort of fire inside me to really want to. It really allowed me to be in the present time, and not just that, but that like sense of curiosity. I then got this. It was almost like a drug. It was like that feeling to where like I can thrive like anywhere in the world, and to be able to experience that is that's a gift, man. So thanks for allowing me to think about that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean when I say the universe is going to make space for you, right? So I'll give you an example. I used to be pretty scared about not having a place to stay, right? So what I mean is, like, if I'm leaving, like, let's say today I'm leaving on a road trip, right? And if I don't have a place to stay tonight, like, I get a little anxiety, right? Used to be. now I just know that the universe is going to make space for me.
Right.
Right. Because
Love
I've had enough of those experiences where like I know in the back of my mind that I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maybe today's my last day, but other than that, I'm going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If that freight train doesn't come my way, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah. whatever
whatever it is. Right. Because we never know.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that's what I mean. But like the universe is going to make space for you.
Yeah.
You know, I was traveling out west actually during the pandemic, and like there were several times when I left in the morning, and of course I had my camping gear with me. I did a lot of camping. I only maybe hoteled like a handful of nights. I mostly camped because I like camping, and it's also really cheap usually.
Of course.
But I like camping because I like that connectedness to the wilderness and just to have my own campsite and be able to have a fire and get my stove out and cook dinner and and things like that. But yeah, there was several times when I left out in the morning and I went on my adventure, and I remember one time in particular I was going towards the Grand Canyon. And I didn't have a place to stay, and I don't remember what time it was. I know it was dark. It was probably 9:00 at night, and I'm just still.
You hear the wolves howling in the background.
Yeah, right. And I'm just driving down the road, and a hotel presents itself, and I'm like, damn, man, like the universe is providing a space again.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about a lot of things in our conversation, and I'm a fairly private person. Normally, I don't really, I used to kind of squawk a lot on social media. I went through a really terrible experience with someone, and that kind of changed my perspective on social media. But I've always been sort of a fairly private person, but I see this as a great opportunity, to share, to share some of these, these things that I've learned and some of my adventures, and hopefully somebody's going to listen to this and be like, hey, I want to go trekking in the Himalayas.
Right.
I want to go volunteer to teach music to kids in Nepal for a month and live with a family, or, I want to go on safari in Nepal and see a tiger. Like,
it's cool,
just
isn't it?
Wild. But yeah, like I just, when I work with young people, I tell them like, look, money's going to come and go. Things are going to happen in your life.
Mm-hmm.
But you're never going to replace those experiences.
Yeah.
And I almost,
memories.
Yeah. And I almost sort of see myself sometimes as like a collector of experiences.
Oh, I like that. I'm taking a mental note of that one for sure.
Yeah. I mean, not for the sake of collecting experiences, but because those experiences have meaning.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
So like, you've told me some experiences you had. I mean, like, what would be an experience that you've had traveling or being sort of, let's just say, outside of your comfort zone that's, stuck with you?
Gosh, do you remember when...
No, I don't.
When the world was supposed to end with the Mayan calendar?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah, all these freak out moments never seem to come true. It's like, it's weird, right?
Well, dude, I was in Amsterdam when the world was supposed to end. And
yep.
There was like, in the newspapers, like even in the newspapers, it's like, is this the last day? There were like,
I remember. Yeah.
So many things that were like reminding me of this last day. And I'm like, shit, if if it's gonna be the last day, I mean, like, I'm in Amsterdam. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
how
it's a crazy
bad?
place.
Yeah, I'm like, how bad could my last day be? So, man, that was one of the experiences that really helped shape my life, actually, because, like, that I don't get me wrong, like, I did have just a little bit of anxiety about what was going to happen, although it then like brought me let's see here, a moment of clarity
Mm,
where I was like, dude, like, look at the freaking earth and like how long it's been here. Like, there's nothing or no one that can predict an end to all of this craziness that has
yeah,
already occurred. And I'm like,
yeah,
in my mind, I'm like, okay, like everything is going to be fine. Like there's nothing like the billions of years that have created all of this, right? And then
yeah,
like
yeah,
one day it's just going to end because because somebody said so.
yeah,
So gosh, man,
yeah.
that was one time that I really and then woke up the next day and I had like, dude, I had like a fresh slate. I was like, I felt like I could
Oh,
take, I felt like
yeah,
I could take on the whole world
yeah.
after that.
It was like Y2K,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, oh, all the computers are gonna die and everything's gonna stop working, and literally, it was the most anticlimactic, uneventful, whatever day of the week morning it was when we all woke up and realized, like, wow, you just like freaked us out
Yeah.
for completely nothing. Like, it's like it couldn't have been any more normal. It was just like,
Right.
oh, it just went from 0 to 1. Like, with okay, cool. Well, like, it's
It's wild, isn't it?
yeah.
Something that we have been conversing about that I really want to touch on is something called that you actually introduced to me called levels of analysis.
Mm.
Yeah, I think we should
Yeah,
dive.
that's a deep dive.
Yeah, I think we should dive into that. For the listeners who don't know, is that a term that you created yourself, or is this something that you
I
learned on
I
your
mean, sure, I'll
travels?
take
Or
I'll take credit for it. I mean,
right?
I don't. It's yeah. I mean, I guess that term, like, I've never heard anybody say it that way. I mean, I'm sure somebody has. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's how many billion people in the world.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, levels of analysis. I mean, it's simple, and it's also extremely complicated at the same time.
Okay.
The way I look at it is it's a framework that I apply to difficult questions, or to whether it's they say, like, don't talk about religion and politics. So I think we should probably talk
We
about
should
religion
do.
and politics,
That's why
because
we're here, man.
because
We're
I've
in the
never
couch.
been one to, like, let people tell me what to do very well. I'm
Nice.
generally a leader and a mentor, and not someone who's like good at. I mean, I'm an okay employee, I guess, but I'm a much better leader, and I always tend to be the one that, like, steps up and kind of takes the reins when shit goes sideways, especially doing events. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, yeah. So levels of analysis. I mean, it's basically, the idea is that everything has different levels of complexity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that, for me, we have, like, I'm sure other people have these experiences too, but, like, we have these formative moments in our life.
Mm.
Like, I was sharing with you when I went over, I hiked the Annapurna circuit in Nepal and went
Mhm.
over Thorongla Pass, which is over 17,000 feet, which is a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's a famous thing, and it was a dream fulfilled for me. It was something I had wanted to do
Check
since
off
I
the
was,
bucket
like,
list.
seeing these things in National Geographic as a kid. But the levels of analysis is a framework that you can apply to situations, and it's like, think about it like an onion, right?
Okay.
If you have an onion in your hand and you want to understand this onion, like, the surface level things are, easily peeled away, like those first couple like really papery brown layers, right? And so the formative thing that I started to talk about, the formative thing for me was when my mom said to me as a kid, she said, some people are surface swimmers and some people want to be deep sea divers.
Oh, yeah, I love that.
Right? And so that's a metaphor. Like, my mom's a brilliant woman. And
shout to Mom.
Yeah, dude, like I can't
for bringing him here.
I can't do enough shout outs to Mom. She's I mean, she's like she's one of my favorite people in the whole world, for sure. And we have a great relationship, which I'm very, very grateful for. And I do everything I can as she's getting older to help her and be there for her and stuff. So, but she said that to me and it stuck with me. So it's like, if you want to understand an onion, and you if you peel away those first couple brown papery layers, like those come off really easily, right? And then you get to that first kind of like real oniony layer that you'd actually want to eat, right? And then you got to kind of like if you're doing it with your hands, right, you'd have to like get your fingernails in there and really pull at it. And eventually, you're pulling away all these layers of this onion and you're crying and your hands are going to smell for maybe a day or two. Yeah. And you got onion under your fingernails and breath. All, right? Yeah, exactly. So all that is to say that, like, the levels of analysis framework is like, how do you peel away the layers of things? Like asking questions that lead to other questions for the sake of having a full, deep understanding of something.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, one of the things, like, and I guess I kind of want to have a little disclaimer. Because we're probably going to get into some stuff that's controversial, and it might even be upsetting sometimes for people to hear. And I don't intend any upset. But one thing that I've learned, especially studying history and the history of politics and the history of ideas, is like a lot of the ideas and the things that we think we know, if you really dig into them, they're not true.
Like what?
And they're not real.
What you got?
So, like, take slavery, for example. It's a very difficult topic, right? And I've heard people have very good understandings, and I've also heard, politicians talk about how, black people were the only people that were enslaved, and yes, to a degree that's true about our history in this country, but these things exist within a much greater context. And so, and this is not, and I don't mean this in a way to like belittle any group's experience or anything like that. Again, it's like the levels of analysis. Like, how do I have like the most complete understanding of this thing?
Right.
And so, it's like you look at history of different places and slavery is the norm of, you look at whether it's Native American cultures enslaved one another. The Vikings enslaved the Irish, the Barbary pirates, the Corsairs, they were North African pirates who enslaved, Europeans for several hundred years.
Oh, wow.
I always ask people, like, where does the word slave come from? Do you know?
I don't, actually. Let me think. Slave, Slav.
I think we might have we might have talked about this. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
The Slavic people of Eastern Europe.
Okay.
Right? And and again, it's important to understand these things on a deeper level because a lot of things are used. It's like these things are used politically and otherwise, and they're used to divide people. And, when I hear a senator or a congressperson, on the pulpit talking about these ahistorical versions of history for their own political gain that ends up polarizing people. It's like, I want to like jump up and down and scream and be like, you're either ignorant of the history of the world, or the history of the world and you're lying about it. Right. And I'm not really sure which one is worse. Maybe the lying about it, if you know the truth, is worse. But yeah, I mean, it's like, look into all those things. If you want to learn about slavery, like, look into it.
Right.
I mean, and those answers are probably going to be uncomfortable to people, like the fact that, I didn't know for a long time. I didn't know that North Africans enslaved Europeans. It's part of the reason that the United States Navy was created.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Was to stop because they were pirates on ships and they were attacking and taking the cargo and enslaving the people. And there was a point where the United States was paying the Barbary pirates a large amount of money every year to basically not attack our ships.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it's just, we have to understand that looking back, like, that was the norm for everyone. Study Japanese history, study Chinese history, study the African history. I mean, study the history of the peoples of the Americas, North America, Central America, South America. Slavery is all throughout all of their histories. Slavery wasn't officially outlawed in Africa until 1981.
Yeah, I remember you said that. Gosh, that's...
And so, like, these are really uncomfortable truths that, I mean, I take no pleasure in any of this. I'm part of my heritage is Irish. The Barbary pirates enslaved the Irish. The Vikings enslaved the Irish. The British certainly took advantage of the Irish quite a bit. And it's like, people don't know that, I mean, the United States is the only country that fought a war to end slavery.
Oh, that's a good point.
They don't know that, we worked with the British at great cost of lives and treasure to end the slave trade. And it's, all of this information is available.
Right.
And so it's...
Let me ask you something. As far as... because you really do seem very well versed in history, different histories. Where did your love for that come from, and what made you want to learn those things yourself?
I've always loved history. My mom is a brilliant woman. She's studied history quite a bit, which is interesting because we agree about a lot and we also disagree about things. So my mom and I have very spicy conversations at times, and I think we learn a lot from each other. Yeah, because we have different interests, and she's obviously lived through a lot more than I have. But I loved studying Native American cultures when I was a kid. That was a big thing for me. I was a big fan of Davy Crockett. Like, I just thought, like, the idea of this person being able to, survive in the wilderness and make a name for himself, which is like something that very few people could probably actually do now, is to like survive in the wilderness with like a knife and a hatchet and a flint and steel.
And it's not anything like the Naked and Afraid shows that
right. But yeah, I mean, from I used to go to, I always loved reenactments. Would love going to tour like old battlefields. We used to go to Williamsburg for a number of years for Christmas. Oh, wow. And yeah. And then when I was a little kid, I went to a place a few times with a friend of mine. I went with them on their family trips 2 or 3 times. And it was a reenactment place where all of the reenactors would act as if they lived in that time and did not know of like today.
Oh, wow.
Right. So they're like, how did you get here? And I'm like, oh, we drove.
It's like they
They're
took
like,
a time
oh,
machine almost.
Yeah. They like acted as if they didn't know what a plane was, what a
that's
car
cool.
was. Like they acted as if they really were living in that time frame and did not have, knowledge of our time. So I remember that being really interesting. I think that there's so much to be learned from history. That like you could study one culture for your entire life and not learn it all,
right?
And I'm a person who's like, I really like learning, and I guess that comes with being an autodidact. But I've always just really enjoyed learning, and I've always enjoyed like knowing what the actual truth of things are.
Oh yeah. And not just like the face value, not just like what you hear or read in maybe like a textbook itself, but finding out like the true history of things and not just what's like spewed out there.
It's that levels of analysis thing again. And I mean a lot of the truths of our history as humans, but in our country too, a lot of the things that people talk about politically now, it's like almost like people are just willfully ignorant of our history.
Right.
This is probably going to sound somewhat controversial, but like the idea, like the fact of our history of discrimination, of like anti-black discrimination, like the truth of our history is that it was political, in large sense, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm not saying that there weren't racist people and all, because of course there were, but that was largely driven by politics. Every single Jim Crow law, slavery itself, the KKK, discrimination laws, these were all a part of the Democrat Party. They were all a part of the Democrat Party platform. The Confederacy was the Democrat Party. They were the party of slavery. Lincoln was the first Republican president. And the part of that platform was the abolition of slavery, right? And people don't realize that before, after we broke away from Great Britain, before the United States was before it became the United States, when it was just all the colony states, that some of those states tried to end slavery back then.
Oh, wow.
So, and I say this because I don't like tribalism.
Okay.
Studying history has taught me that when you put people into groups, you dehumanize them, right?
Oh, wow.
Like,
okay.
We're like white men, right? So what the fuck does that mean?
I know, right?
I can cuss on your podcast.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because I get a little fired up sometimes, right?
Yeah, get it.
But like, what the fuck does that mean? That doesn't define me in any way, right? And so there's this narrative, and it's highly politicized, that it was white people against black people. And there is truth to that, of course. But it was the Democrat Party that was driving that narrative. It was a political narrative. And it's something that, today, there's like this narrative that Republicans are racist and all of these other different things. And it's like there's very little truth to a lot of these political narratives. And it's very much this propagandized view of people that again, if you apply the levels of analysis to these politicized discussions and you pull away the layers of the onion and you look at the actual history, like, please, if you're watching this and you're questioning what I'm saying, like, please go and look all this stuff up.
Yeah.
Like, the Democrats filibustered the civil rights laws.
What does filibuster mean again?
Basically, delaying action by having just endless debate.
Okay.
So I think they debated for like 70 days or something. I don't know if it's still the record, but I'm pretty sure it was the record for the longest filibuster. It may still be. I can't.
And who debated?
I can't know all of the facts and figures, but
who debated? Who did the debating?
Well, they didn't want the vote to happen, so they're basically stalled.
Okay.
I mean, if you look at the voting, you can look at the voting records, and the Republicans supported the civil rights legislation to a much larger degree than the Democrats did. When Teddy Roosevelt started the Progressive Party, like, he didn't invite the black the black delegates because he wanted to pander to the racist Southern Democrats.
What is the Progressive Party again? How would you define that?
Well, he started that party. Like, he was a Republican, and he was snubbed by the Republican Party for the presidential nomination against Taft, I think it was.
Okay.
Oy, don't fact check me too hard.
On that, at least.
But yeah. But I'm pretty sure. But anyway, so he knew he wasn't going to get the nomination. He started the Progressive Party, which is supposed to be more about workers' rights and a lot of things that we consider as progressive today. But even like the progressives have a dark history. People, I think today, like, we're just so highly propagandized that, like, please, like, ask these questions and go and look at these things, please, like, go and do your research and don't outsource your thinking. Don't let these people on these squawk boxes,
Right.
whether it's on your phone or a TV, like, don't let these people hijack your mind. I mean, yes, of course there was like white against black sentiment, but it was driven by politics. Was, actually, so after the Civil War ended, between 1865 and 1900, do you know how many black politicians were elected to office? And I'm talking even senators and congresspeople. Do you know?
I mean, I would maybe possibly venture to guess maybe like 20, 50?
Multiply 1,500.
Oh wow! Oh my gosh!
So the real truth of this is, the real truth of this time in our history was that black people were standing together. Okay, and I say this as a person, like, I've worked with so many black artists and, like, love their stories, and just I've made art with these people. Like, I have nothing but love in my heart for everyone. And I don't see, like, of course I see people's skin color. Of course I see people's differences. Of course I respect different cultures, but I don't think that any of your outward characteristics is what defines you. You know what I'm saying? So the real truth of it, as I see it, the real truth of this time period was that these black politicians were gaining power. We have to remember there's like 4 million freed people now in the South. And that's where we get the KKK from. The KKK was started by former Confederate soldiers, I believe 6, who were Democrats. And they started the KKK, and they terrorized black people. They terrorized, and in the movie that I told you about that you watched, it's called The Free State of Jones.
Yeah,
and it's a Matthew McConaughey film. It's I'm not a huge movie buff, but that's one of the ones that they have a brilliant depiction of this whole thing, right?
Yeah, it really does help you understand the history and how unfortunate some of these circumstances in the United States were. But I do feel like it really the movie itself really did kind of show the perseverance of of some of those characters.
Yeah.
And gosh, man, it really made me think of just, some of the things that I consider a problem or a struggle, is nothing.
The incredible strength of the black community at that time was seen as a huge threat,
Yeah.
and like, I just don't know how well people understand that time, Reconstruction and
Right?
post-Reconstruction. Reconstruction was until 1877, I believe.
Okay.
So it didn't last that long, and Grant didn't really want to send troops down south very much. That became fairly unpopular.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I was like, why would martial law be popular? Like, nobody's going to be a fan of that for too long, right?
Right.
But even the Northerners were, tiring of that. So that's, that's like where we get a lot of this from,
Mm-hmm.
and it's, to me, like, I have mixed feelings about, Confederate statues. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, I'm sure people are going to be upset to hear that at some point, but
Right.
like, this is respecting perspectives.
Got to, man. That's why we're here.
And some of these things, like, yes, a lot of our history is uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
but I have mixed feelings about it. And I, but it is Democrats taking down statues of past Democrats.
Mm.
And, and I don't mean, like, I don't like politicians in general. I don't really like either of the political parties. So I feel like I'm fair to criticize all politicians.
I think we all are in a way.
And I think that even if you do have party loyalty, if you are the type of person who feels a loyalty to one party or another, or maybe as an independent or something else, like, I still think that one of the best things you can do is criticize your political party and the other people, and look at both sides of these arguments, again, with, like, respecting perspectives. I mean, like, we know what it looks like when the left goes too far.
Mm-hmm.
Again, with history, I mean, people don't realize, like, the idea that Nazis are on the right wing, like, that to me doesn't, it's a new idea. Like, the Nazis were socialists, right? Nazi literally means National Socialist German Workers' Party.
Okay.
Like, they were socialists. To get back to the progressive thing, the progressives, early progressives, believed in things like eugenics.
What is that again?
Eugenics, essentially, like, the basic view is essentially the idea that certain people or types of people are basically, like, bad for the gene pool. Right? It's a very it ties into this political ideology that people have, that, like, we know better than everybody else, and so you just have to let us do all of the thinking and all of the planning, and everything's going to get better. Which, again, like, there is no historical evidence that that's true. Right? This is just an ideology. It's like a thought that people grab a hold of, and they think, yeah, this is the way. But it's basically the idea that, we should essentially kill off people that are going to be bad for the gene pool. So, I mean, go and look this stuff up. Like, go and look up the history of these ideas. Like, if you're interested, study the history of ideas. Like, what is eugenics? What is Marxism? Like, what is critical theory? And what are these things? And like, go back to the lineage, go back to Das Kapital, and go back to, the beginning of Marxist thought. Like, essentially, Marxist thought is the idea that the world is divided into oppressors and oppressed, right? And it plays out in history in things like the Holodomor. Like, everyone knows of the Nazi Holocaust, right? And I realize I'm talking a lot, and
no,
like,
it's okay, man. You're
I'm a very
us.
passionate person, and like, when I was growing up, I always felt like, this is going to get a little personal. Like, I always try to explain things to my dad, and I felt like he didn't understand. So like my way of compensating for that was to try to be a really good explainer.
Yeah, you are.
And it's benefited me immensely as like a teacher and a mentor. But anyway, so this idea of, it played out in what was called the Holodomor, which was the Ukrainian genocide. So the idea was that the people that were successful farmers, right? They had a house, they had a piece of land, they had maybe a few, some livestock. These were seen as like the successful people. The idea was that they're successful not because, because they learned how to farm, or they worked hard, or they sacrificed, or, any of the other number of reasons why, we know that people would be successful. The idea was that they were successful because they were oppressing others, right? And so this Marxist idea comes along, and they say, well, we're going to call these people kulaks, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all the kulaks, and we're going to take the farms for ourselves because we're the oppressed people. So what happened is, of course, they killed the farmers who were, Ukraine was and is still a breadbasket, essentially. I mean, it's a flat piece of farmland, basically. Obviously not entirely, but you get what I'm saying. And so they killed all the farmers, and they expropriated all their farms. And the next thing you know, however many millions of people died of starvation.
Wow, man. Let's dig a little bit.
Sorry, it's really uplifting conversation.
No, man, it's something that we need to
kind
of talk about, and it helps people, I think, drives them into finding answers for themselves. But let's go to the topic of like how to think and what to think. You were kind of we were kind of going down that for a second, but kind of dig a little bit as to what that means, and how people can take that information of how you're thinking versus what you're thinking.
Yeah, well, how to think is generally, as I think about it, is like what we're told. Like we're told, I'm sorry, what to think is what we're told. Like we're told something about politics, and we're told that, this person is, whatever pejorative term that they're going to use, and we're told what to think. They have these, it's kind of like the difference between if you have a TV, you have a TV news and somebody's telling you the events versus a round table of people all giving their opinion about something, right? So that's like being told like what to think. It's like if you find that the ideas that are in your head are just things that you've heard people say over and over and over again. Like you really, really, if you want to do this levels of analysis thing, you really have to dig in and realize that some things that you think you're going to realize you're wrong.
You're wrong.
Like be humble about it.
Yeah,
like own the fact,
that.
and own it and move on.
Right? And try and teach people.
And I mean, and that's why I'm
if
here.
You can, right.
That's why I'm here. I mean, I'm here to have, like when we first talked about this, I said like some of these conversations might get really uncomfortable and uncomfortable to listen to. And I understand, like I used to be a lot different than I am now. I've learned how wrong I was about a lot of things by studying a lot of history. But yeah, so how to think versus what to think. I mean, how to think is like the levels of analysis thing. It's like who, what, where, when, why, how. Like you can start with that. Like that's a good levels of analysis piece. You asked me the other day, like, how would you apply that to your work and what
everyday life?
Did you so when you were at work that day? How did it show up for you? Like the levels of analysis. How did it show
let's
up for
see
you?
here. I well, as I entered the people's houses, I kind of asked them lots of questions and tried to understand, like, had we ever been there before? What were some of the problems that they were? It was really asking questions. It was, why are we here?
A question sort of led to the next.
Yep.
Okay.
Led to the next question. And then kind of also led to the customer even like delving some information that they didn't think was applicable to the situation in helping me diagnose the problem when it actually ended up being something, very, very important to me diagnosing the problem itself. So, yeah, I kind of navigated my whole day with those questions, and man, it really helped me to figure out some of the problems that some of the heaters and the air conditioners that I was fixing helped me figure out, how to get to the bottom of the actual, the problem. And it also allowed me to do it in a way that like was educational. And it helped me kind of learn throughout the process. And then at the same time, what it did was it helped me learn about the customer, and like some of the things that they were going through. And like, say it was like now the challenges were coming up against like going to like an elderly woman's house who like weren't able to answer some of those questions. So I had to kind of like levels of analysis like myself, like, okay, am I asking the right questions?
Yeah.
It made me really think about, am I digging in the right direction to be able to find, the answer to a problem that we can probably solve together. But I mean, man, there's so many there's so many problems out there that maybe we're just not, asking, the right questions to. So it takes a little bit to think about that. So yeah, let me ask you, Brian, what is or are some of the hardest things about the levels of analysis for you to either like grasp or to kind of explain, to kind of give to the people?
I think the most challenging thing for me has been learning when I'm wrong and recognizing like the things that that where the evidence does not line up with my position. And it's almost like there's too many examples to list, but one that's probably relatable and also I know is going to be controversial for a lot of people. Obviously, I don't shy away from controversy. Shout out to Zippo, by the way, because this hand warmer is amazing. If in case anybody's wondering, like, this is like it's a little cold. It's been keeping my hands warm. I don't mind the cold. I just don't like being cold.
Right,
so,
we said that.
But yeah, like, I mean, the idea of like being immune to evidence, like the Bible says, by their fruits you shall know them. Right. So it's like, what that means to me is that you have to look at the evidence of things. It's like, okay, we have XYZ political policy, right? I mean, maybe you want to say, well, Baltimore's been run by the Democrat Party since 1967. Like, and is there evidence that it's really gotten better? And I don't mean to be bashing on the Democrats. Like I said, I don't like politicians. I just am using this as an example.
Of course.
But my mom told me a story. We were talking about the history of Baltimore and kind of doing a deep dive. And she said that when she was a kid, her and her family used to get dressed up and go shopping on Howard Street. And Howard Street was like the shishi shopping district, like with the fancy department stores. Been to Howard Street lately?
Right? Who knew?
Right?
Gosh. There are pockets of certain places that maybe aren't what they once were.
That's a nice way of saying that it's not what it once was. Yeah, for sure. But it's interesting because if you go there, you can actually see some of the remnants of the past, of like the old like Hochel Cone and like some of the old department stores. But by their fruits you shall know them. Like are these politicians really making anything better? And to the extent that people want to hate other people for what they think their political beliefs are. I mean, people might think they know what my political beliefs are by some of the comments I've made. I guarantee you that you don't, because it's a lot more complex than just picking a side to me.
Right.
I very much consider myself an independent. And like I said, I don't like either political party. I like some ideas on both sides, but, like, don't be immune to evidence. Like, if there's evidence that you're wrong, you're probably wrong. It's like Occam's razor, right? The simplest explanation is probably the right one.
Right.
It's like people used to go and sleep in Druid Hill Park when my mom was a kid in the summertime because not everybody had air conditioning.
Wow.
I mean, that's how far we've fallen in a way. And don't get me wrong, like, I love this city. This city has given me so much. I've given a lot of myself to the city and the people of this city. So I don't mean to sound like really negative, but again, it's that levels of analysis where like the facts, like as conservative commentator Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about your feelings. And a lot of people are like bristle at the thought of that, right? And I get it, but it's still true. Like whether you like it or not, it's still true. And so we have to, we have to confront real things and real problems with real solutions, And I hate to see all of this political division, and I hate to see people that, especially like people that say that they're tolerant, be so intolerant of anyone that disagrees with them.
Right.
Have a conversation, like respect perspectives. I mean, like, like my family goes from one side of the political spectrum to the other. And we all talk and we all love each other and we disagree and we learn from one another. And I mean, one of my cousin's husbands, I've had like brilliant conversations with him and we royally disagree about stuff.
Right. But I think the fact that you're taking the time to talk about it is extremely important. And I hope this conversation and lots of the other conversations that I've had with some other guests have helped some listeners out there to be able to pose certain questions. Let me ask you this though. You mentioned a Bible verse there. Let's see. Let's touch just a little bit on religion itself. Do you feel like religion is something that is critical in our navigating life itself? I think that was the way I wanted to ask it.
I do. I think religion and spirituality, what's always interested me is that religion and science dead end at the same place.
Oh,
some people call it Genesis in the Christian tradition. Some people call it the Big Bang Theory, but they dead end at the same place.
Yeah.
So, I do. Religion, I consider myself to be more spiritual than religious, like personally.
Yeah.
I have studied Christianity. I mean, I was raised as a Christian. I sort of found my way into Buddhism, and which I don't really consider Buddhism so much a religion as like more of a way of being.
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, I mean, in my travels, I've been to, synagogues and temples and, Buddhist temples, Hindu temples. I've seen ancient rituals in Nepal that they say that there's 365 days a year and 366 festivals a year in Nepal.
Oh, wow.
They have, it's really cool. Like they have a festival for everything. It's wild.
It's on my bucket list.
Dude, go. And let me know. I'll give you some pointers. It's an amazing place. It's like India light.
Oh.
Like India is like the most intense place in the world that I've ever been to.
And why do you say that? What do you mean by intense?
It is an all-out assault on your senses. It is Sights, sounds, smells, the taste. I mean, you go from the most amazing smells to stale urine in like 5 steps. The people are amazing. But it's also like they have no personal space. So you're, and like, somebody might sit on your lap on like a tuk-tuk. I mean, it's wild.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that religion binds us together. I think that we would do well to remember that, everyone wants to talk about rights, the right to this and the right to that. And I'm a big, I'm sort of like a classical liberal, I guess you would say, which is, you can go and look that up, to have a full explanation, but it's different than what a lot of people would consider like liberal now. But I do think that, I'm a big believer in the First Amendment. Like, there's a lot of places in the world where I've lived places in the world where you can't say what's on your mind. And there's nothing worse. Trust me.
That's unfortunate.
Like,
right?
the idea of misinformation, like, let's not even get into that. But anyway, misinformation is just something that they don't want you to talk about, pretty much. But yeah, the idea that we have human rights comes from religion. It comes from the idea that we're all created in the image of God. In other words, each human being has value. Like, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to be anything. Like, everybody matters. Everybody has value. That's why I've always been a humanist. That's why I try to treat everyone equally. I try to treat people with respect. I always try to make people laugh. Like, I purposely didn't I think I cracked one joke earlier, but I purposely didn't try to like make a lot of jokes. Although, like, if you ask my coworkers, like, I'm always making my coworkers laugh. I'm always trying to lighten the mood a little bit. I think humor is a very powerful gift. And I've always liked comedians and stuff, but
me too.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, that, maybe not being like a religious fundamentalist necessarily, but understanding that we're all connected, and in whatever way that shows up for you, and you're on that journey, and you're learning, if you want to learn about these different perspectives, yeah, I do think it matters. The idea that we have human rights. I mean, we were like a first country to have the idea that our rights come from God, essentially, not from other men. Like, that's why our Bill of Rights says that the government can't do things to us because they're not the ones that give us our rights.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Right? Like, we have rights because, however you wish to see it, we are created in the image of God. Right? And I think that's really powerful. And I've lived in places, like I said, where you don't have those rights. And I guess what I want to leave people with, what I really want to leave people with is gratitude.
Yeah.
It's so easy to complain about things. And I'm not saying that there's nothing to complain about, because of course certain things could be better. But if you're complaining on the internet, on your $1,000 cell phone, sitting on the couch, and you buy your food from the grocery store like everybody else, like, study some history, like, realize that 100 years ago, most people lived on less than $1 a day. Realize that in for a long time, people lived with livestock in their house because it was so cold that the livestock was part of what helped to warm the house. I mean, can you imagine living? I mean, this is true, like the Dark Ages and things like that. I mean, they call it the Dark Ages for a reason.
Yeah.
Like I said to you, like, I would love to do a podcast for people about the horrors of history.
Yeah. I feel like you could educate a lot of people with this information.
But just like, be grateful. Like, and I don't mean to say like, don't work for change or don't, don't put your all into what you're passionate about. Like, of course, do those things, of course, like try to make the world around you better. Of course, like see the things that are wrong. Like, yes, but be grateful for all of these things because we live in the most prosperous, information rich, wealthy time in human history. Be grateful that you have free speech. Right. Be grateful that your voice matters. Be grateful that you live in a place where in a time where you're not constantly farming all day, every day, and be grateful that you're not a serf. Be grateful, like go study a period in history, like pick a period, pick the Middle Ages, pick 100 years ago,
and
1,000 years ago. Right. And just,
now.
And like, don't look at everyone in history as if you know better than them.
Right.
Like, understand, like, yes, they screwed things up, of course, but understand that they were operating in the time that they were operating with the things that they knew.
Right.
And 100 years from now, people are going to look back and they're going to be like, what the fuck were they doing in 2026? I mean, we just lived through a pandemic, right? And talk about the levels of analysis to kind of tie all of these things together. The levels of analysis, that the not outsourcing your thinking, the what to think versus how to think. We were told, all of us, constantly, every day, that the jab, as some people call it, was safe and effective, right? And this is a thing that's, I understand, highly controversial, right? Polarizing for a lot of people. People were saying, oh, if you don't get the jab, you shouldn't be treated in a hospital. I'm like, whoa, really? Like, let's be human about this, right? But we were told that it's safe and effective. There's no evidence that it, like, what evidence are you going on? Show me the long-term testing. Oh, we didn't do long-term testing. So again, it's like, don't be immune to the evidence. Don't let people outsource your thinking. Think for yourself. And if you think for yourself and you come back to the same conclusion, okay.
Yeah.
Or maybe you're still wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like my sister asked me what I was going to do on this podcast. And I said that I hope to help people connect the dots.
Okay.
Right? But you can't connect dots that you don't know exist.
Right.
So learn about history. Think for yourself. Like, really question things. Like you said, when you were at work that day, like one question led to the next, led to the next, led to the next. And it led to you being a better tech that day.
Yeah, definitely.
It
did.
So,
I love all those lessons that we can learn, and you mentioned you were talking about $1,000 cell phones. Wait, who is this? I hear something in the distance here. Yeah. Yes. Can I help you? Oh, this is Brian. Oh, wait, Brian Potts? What year is this? 1990? Oh, wow. Goodness. Okay, wait a second. I got somebody here who really just wants to speak with you, and I'm going to hand the phone over here.
Hey, so look, I know that you're stubborn and that you're probably not going to want to take my advice. But what I will tell you is that you're going to live a great life. You're going to follow your passions. You're going to make people around you laugh. You're going to make music that's going to change people's lives. And some of the things that you do will lead to growth in communities that you won't realize until years later. On a personal note, stay away from the tall blonde from high school. She's no good. Other than that, you made pretty good choices, but definitely that one, just, keep walking. When you get there, you'll know what I mean when you get there. But yeah, take good care of yourself. Start saving money a little bit earlier. Probably be a good idea. Don't pass up any adventures. I know you won't. I know you're an adventurous person. And for God's sake, keep playing and practicing your drums. Love you, man.
Love you. All right, you heard him. Love you, dog. Peace. Nice.
That's fun. I like that. I like that. Yeah.
All right. And this is even funner.
But I guarantee you, if I got a call back then, I'd be like,
you'd be like, who?
I'm not taking his
I'm not
advice.
taking it.
So I tried to give myself good advice. That advice I think I would have taken.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. I'm stubborn, so I mean I know myself well.
All right,
Comes
so
from
I
the
have
Irish
some
part.
right. I got some rapid fire questions here.
All right, I'll do my best.
All right, and this is rapid fire, so off the dome as quick as possible.
Yep,
Okay.
gotcha.
All right. Who is the funniest person in your family?
Me.
Oh, darn. Who is your favorite character from DC or Marvel comics?
I don't really know. I never got into comics.
Okay.
Love the art. I just never followed any.
Okay. Which fast food restaurant could you do without?
I haven't eaten McDonald's since 2010. I will never eat it again.
There you go.
Or Taco Bell. I don't like Taco Bell either. It's terrible.
Okay. What does love mean to you?
Love is a journey. It's a home. It's something I try to reserve apart for myself and apart for everyone around me who matters, and all my friends and family and Steph, and I love you all, and my Jackson family and my Potts family and all my extended families, and yeah, everybody.
Love it.
My music family too.
Love it.
Everybody.
Who's the most famous person you've ever met? That's a good one.
Off the top of my head, maybe Dennis Chambers.
Oh, okay. That's him. That's it. That's your answer.
Famous Baltimore drummer. Look him up. Go listen to him. He's amazing. Love the guy to death. He's awesome.
Does money buy happiness?
Yes and no. The cost of everything is the time that you give up for that thing.
Love that. Perfect. What do you remember about preschool?
I remember
rapid fire.
Yeah, I remember it was a little Catholic school, I think, or maybe a Lutheran. It was a Lutheran school, actually. It was a cool place.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
wasn't like one of the really cool kids, but that was okay.
Yeah,
So
preschool,
cool.
man.
I'm a cool kid now. Who cares?
Right. Name one rule in your house you'd like to establish.
Leave no mess. Clean up after yourself.
Love that. Have you ever broken something and let another person take the blame?
No, I'm a pretty honest person. I own up to my mistakes to the best of my abilities.
Have you ever waved at someone you thought you knew but realized you didn't?
I have a photographic memory, so if I wave at someone, no, I don't forget people's faces and I don't forget songs. Okay,
come up with a really good excuse for missing work. They're on the line right now. Really good.
I don't need an excuse I don't miss work, so.
Okay, dude, good answer. Yeah. If you could add anything to your backyard, what would it be?
$1 billion in cash.
Oh, you're on point.
$2 billion. Why not?
Why not? Do you think you'll ever be famous? What do you think you'll be famous for?
I've had chances. I never wanted to be famous. I've just wanted to follow my passions and make the world a better place and make people laugh when I can.
Love it. What game have you spent the most hours playing? Whether it's a video game, board game.
I've never owned a video game system, but I play disc golf, and so that's probably
nice.
I love games though, like actual games.
For sure.
Games you play with other people.
If you could be invisible for 1 hour, what would you do?
Jeez.
Rapid.
I would go somewhere that I would never. I would go see like maybe the inside of a nuclear power plant, or I would go somewhere maybe in like a highly restricted kind of area and photograph, you know, like
Nice.
document it.
Love that. If you could repaint the house any color, which color would you use?
I don't know, probably like a modern kind of gray.
Modern gray. There it is. Do you own a piggy bank?
I don't think so.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Which cartoon do you wish you were a character on?
I never got that into cartoons, but I loved this show about drawing. I think it was like Commander Mark Learns to Draw or something, and he drew these really cool like space creatures and like, yeah.
Nice.
So
All right.
I was never much into cartoons, but
one last one. Coconut or pineapple?
pineapple, but coconut water.
There we go.
Yeah, fresh pineapple though, for sure.
For the record.
Yeah.
All right, Bri. Hey, man, listen, I really appreciate you being here. And, thanks for diving into some topics that maybe we haven't gotten to talk about on the podcast in the past. And really getting to hear about your musical history. And I look forward to us. We're going to be working on some music in the near future.
That's the plan, yeah.
And I'm really excited for that. And, hey, man, thank you for being
thank
here.
you.
And hey, thanks for joining us tonight on the Respecting Perspectives podcast. And we'll see you for the next one. Peace out.